Hi, it's hello again from Dawn's Emporium and back in orange for a reason. I did a video on the 1st of this month talking about the whole Wear Orange movement and mainly the American side of the Indigenous residential school program over there, and I'd been keeping my eye on the situation in Canada, and more has happened, and so this video is about the residential school program in Canada. Now, I've had to use news sources and also websites set up for and by the Indigenous population of Canada, as well as other sites to get certain pieces of information, quotes and the like. So this one's probably got more in it than the American one has. Hopefully it's all okay. Now, on May the 29th of 2021, 215 graves were found on the grounds of Kamloops Indian Residential School. It was once the largest residential school in Canada and operated between 1890 and 1969 under the Catholic Church, and then was taken over by the Canadian government and ran as a day school until 1978. 215 graves were found there. On the 24th of June, at the old Marivale Indian Residential School in southeastern Saskatchewan. I can't say it, I'm sorry. I can say it up here. By the time it gets to tongue, it's gone. Which was again run by the Roman Catholic Church from 1899 to 1997. And I'm not sure if it just did this nation, but they were found by the Cowessess First Nation. It could also have been used by other nations. 751 unmarked graves were found using ground penetrating radar. And on the 30th of June, at the old St. Eugene's Mission School near Cranbrook, British Columbia, which was yet again operated by the Catholic Church. I'm noticing something here. Between 1890 and 1970, there were 182 graves of children between the ages of 7 and 15 found. This school was for the children from the, excuse me for this, as you might have noticed, a bit rubbish with words. It appears to be, again, English rubbish, Kootenai Nation, which includes the Lower Kootenay and surrounding communities, children's graves. So that is 1,148 children's graves from 3 schools. Now, there were at least 130 schools operating in Canada. Numbers of missing children vary between if you ask the government and if you ask First Nations people. By the way, you may notice when I speak about Canada, I normally say First Nations, because whenever it comes to Canadian articles, very clear, it's First Nations. When it comes to American articles, nobody's clear on what to call Indigenous Americans. So I prefer to say Indigenous Americans, because guess what? they're Americans that are indigenous, as opposed to everybody else who just flooded and took over their country. If there are any indigenous Americans from the US who would like to tell me what you'd prefer to be called, I am up for that. In fact, I will remake part 1 specifically with the right terminology. Just like to point that out. So yeah, numbers vary between 4,100 missing children and 10,000 missing children. Well, if only 4,100 children are missing, we've already found a third of them in 3 schools. So I doubt those numbers are right. And if we go by 10,000 missing children, we've already found over a tenth of them from 3 schools. Now, if we go by those 3 schools, average out the numbers, and then multiply it by 130, that makes 382.6 children per school. Times 130, you're actually looking at closer to 49,738 missing children over a roughly 150 to 160 year period could be missing. Because let's face it, these were just First Nations children. Who's actually counting? Do they even have birth certificates? Who's going to miss them? Yeah, that is what First Nations people are up against, and I am not happy about it. I'm sat here in my front room in Lincoln, in England. I have nothing to do with anybody who is First Nations. Don't even have a First Nations friend to call my own. I know of several actors and a few musicians, and you know what? I am seething. I am seething in my skin. But we will get to that further on. Right? So, you average out the numbers of missing children, and we're looking at 7,000 allegedly missing children. I very much doubt it, folks. In the care of residential schools. Now, these conditions, as I said in my last video, were absolutely squalid. The buildings were often poorly built, badly heated, unsanitary. The kids in these schools were physically, mentally, emotionally and sexually abused. There are stories of teenage girls being sexually abused by priests, getting pregnant and then having their newborn babies ripped away from them. Poof, gone. I doubt they were adopted off somehow. They were underfed, not allowed to speak their own language, given new names, having their hair cut, being made to wear, I'm going to say Westerners' clothes, just for the simple fact that I don't know what to call us. No, I do know what to call us, but this is a YouTube video. And by us, I mean Europeans. They tore everything away from them. I watched a video. I would like to big up Indian Horse on this one. I watched a video of a lady and she was on about during the hair cutting ceremony, it felt like everything had been cut away from her. It didn't feel like it at the time, but now that she remembers back to it, it felt like her bond to her family and her people had been cut away. But she was 6 at the time and the youngest child of her family, and she had her hair cut pretty much as soon as she got off the bus. And before she was scrubbed like a dirty potato. I am abridging there, but that was pretty much her wording. So they cut her hair off, and now I am very protective of my hair. I love my lovely long hair. I wish it was longer. So I can imagine how that feels. Just for me, let alone if it had some kind of cultural significance to have long hair, or spiritual significance. Pardon me. Allergies, grand. So, yeah, I just can't get over the way these people were treated at all. And there are a lot of stories like this, and I will keep posting stories like this, because even though I am big on my stones, and you may have noticed I am big on my stones, do you know what? We take stones out of the ground and we put bodies in. And if a body has lived a good life, died a good death, and had a good burial, so be it. But if they haven't, then their story needs telling. Just the same as a very pretty crystal. You take the crystal out, you rip that crystal out the ground. It was minding its own business. You've just brought it out. It doesn't know what's going on. And then you tell it it's got magic powers. It doesn't know what's going on. It's the opposite way round for a human that you're putting into that ground. And in the case of these children, and in the case of everything else that's going on that I will keep getting to, I will not rest until I have gone through every story I can find, which is why I will keep asking for more people to keep giving me more stories for me to make more videos. Now, one of the minds behind this school system. Now, from what I can understand, the school system had already been in place 40 years by this point, and was instituted by the British government when we had control. But one of the minds behind expansion was Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, who said before the House of Commons, I am trying to resist the urge to shiver as I say this, right? When the school is on the reserve, the child lives with its parents, who are savages. And though he may learn to read and write, his habits and training and mode of thought are Indian, and that by putting them in residential schools, they will acquire the habits and modes and thoughts of white men. Yeah. Yeah. Well, frankly, if doing this to children is a good thing and is a stand-up white man thing to do, I'm more than a little ashamed of my skin colour right now. More than a little ashamed. Because to me, no human would do this. And chances are, Sir John A. Macdonald will sit there and say that he was a good, God-fearing man if you could get him from whatever afterlife there may be or not be, just dig up his corpse, I don't really care, and sat him down, he would say he's a good, God-fearing man. Yeah, a bit like all them nuns and all them monks and all them fathers and priests that did that to those children. God-fearing. No, God-fearing, no humble person, no person in their right mind would do that to another human being for any reason whatsoever. Yeah. So, now get on to what's actually happening. So, over 1,100 children's bodies have been dug up between just 3 ex-residential schools. Well, they haven't even been dug up. Most have been found via ground penetrating radar. And since then, there's been a spate of fires in churches, mainly to Catholic churches, and statues of mainly Queen Victoria and Elizabeth II, Queen Elizabeth II, and other people from history have been defaced or taken down. I don't blame you. People are going to tell me off for this, for saying this, but I don't blame you. Let's have a look at the way that First Nations are handling this compared to the UK and the US populations after losing that many people. You have, obviously they've been gone a while. However, after 9/11, there was a massive spike in hate against Muslims, both in the US and UK. Why? These were innocent people. After COVID, there was a massive spike in hate crimes against Oriental people. They didn't even have to be Chinese. They just had to be from the Orient in general. Why? They weren't sitting there in their front rooms in Staten Island or London cooking up viruses. In the UK, a Labour MP was killed for being too lefty by a right-wing person. They were both white, because the murderer didn't, because of his way of thinking, didn't want someone so lefty bringing in a load of people who had more melanin in him, giving away his job to people with a lower chance of skin cancer. There were other reasons, but that's one of them. We have had in the UK, we have had people knifing people. We have had people running vans into people just coming out of the mosque. In the US, you've had shootings of people just being in a gay club. They're not even doing anything. They're just there talking to their friends. Numerous times that's happened. You've had attacks on peace marches and demonstrations. They're not hurting anyone, but somebody decides to shoot or to drive a car through, or all these kinds of things, always attacking people. What are the First Nations people in Canada doing? They're attacking buildings and statues. Buildings and statues. Now, I happen to really quite like architecture, and churches tend to have really good architecture because they have the money, because they don't pay taxes, to spend loads on a building. And I mean loads. Lincoln Cathedral, awesome. I couldn't afford to build that, not even 900 years ago, right? I would be heartbroken if we lost our local cathedral. However, and I would like to point this out, however, if my local cathedral or my local church got burnt down to the ground because the people behind that had committed mass murder, a genocide of a youth, trying to wipe out a people by killing its young, I can't blame them. A statue gets brought down. We've had this in the UK recently, because that statue is the embodiment of something that has harmed us. It's a statue. I have not heard yet of one First Nations person going after a priest or a nun or a monk or any kind of physical harm to people coming out of Sunday Mass or confession. They are taking it much better than a lot of people do, for a lot less of an offensive and a hurtful and a harmful reason. So Am I saying what they're doing is right? No, but they have been wronged so bad, so hard, and for so long. I can't blame them. You know, a virus happens and the world loses its mind, and suddenly we're attacking people because 3 generations ago their family moved from 3 countries over from where that virus is from. How is that right? How is that right? And yet these people, if those schools finished in 1999, that means that the youngest generations who doesn't know about that are my children's generation. So if I had been born in Canada and just so happened to be a tad darker, have cooler parents, no offense mum and dad, but I mean, like, I'm sorry, there are certain peoples in the world that are pretty cool, and First Nations are pretty cool. That's why everybody seems to love dream catchers. They're not exactly a thing outside, you know, we nicked it from them. When you sit there and you look at that, I would have been there. All it would have taken, really, seriously and honestly, is me just to be born in a different body, and I would have been in one of those schools. And that's the way I see it. It was just fluke that I happened to be born here. So yes, I'm angry. I am very angry. And I don't think there are actual words to apologise enough, which, by the way, the British government hasn't done. I managed to find 2 mentions of apologies from Canada. I think one was 2009 and one was 2015. I think 2015 was Justin Trudeau. I never know how to say his surname. Told you, rubbish. The first one was something to do with the Minister for Schools or something like that. I can't remember. I didn't write it down. Sorry, my bad. But you have had nothing from the British government. Seriously. Why? Now, I'm not expecting you to get anything from the British government, I'll be honest. I mean, I live here, and have you seen the way our country is being run at the moment? You can't even get an apology from them when they know they've done something wrong. They just sit there and go, it wasn't me. I was taking an eye test. So, yeah. Part of me feels like I've prattled on. I am not going to lie. Again, I am sorry for being so rubbish at saying words. And yeah, if you want to know what life was like in those schools, look up Indian horse and stories of survivors. Just put them into your search engine and it will bring up videos from the survivors. Some of them, well, all of them are harrowing, but some of them just, yeah, some of them, you just sit there and wonder how on earth these people slept at night. And you sit there and go, you were religious people. Well, I actually do hope that you're right and there is a heaven and a hell, and I know which one you've gone to, because I could never do that, not even to somebody I hated, and especially not to somebody just because they speak a different language. Be ashamed. Right, that's it for me for today. Know your power and big love. Bye.